GM, some people in some community groups have been having some difficulty understanding Polkadot OpenGov and in particular the decision and confirmation periods. So I thought I would make a quick video tonight to hopefully try and explain it to you how I understand it, which hopefully then becomes how you understand it. So hopefully by the end of this video, you will understand what these lines on this graph on the left mean, and then you will understand how governance UIs like Nova Wallet, Subsquare, and PokeAssembly are displaying this information to you. So let's think of the decision period as a graph and a series of lines on a graph. The x-axis here is time and the y-axis is the number of tokens, and then some percentages that we'll go through later. So the first parameter to be aware of is the support curve. This is basically the number of dots voting on a referenda, or you can know it as the voter turnout. For most tracks in OpenGov, the support requirement at the start of a referendum is 50%, or you can think of it as 50% of all dot in circulation has to be voting on this referendum at time equals 0 for it to meet this requirement. And this trends down to 0% support for all tracks in OpenGov, except the whitelisted caller track, which has a 5% support requirement as a minimum. Now, this support curve can be a straight line, it can be a curved line, it can be an even more exaggerated or steep line than this one. But in your head, just think they all start at 50% requirement and trend to 0% requirement. And then at some point, you will end up meeting this requirement, right? It's just, do you meet it at 3 days or something? Do you meet it at 23 days, right? It's all whenever you meet it. And the other parameter to be aware of is the approval curve. This is basically the percentage of ayes versus nays on a referendum. It's quite easy to understand. And this, it can be a straight line like shown here, or it can be a nice curved line. But currently for all referendums at time equals 0 up here, the approval requirement is 100% aye, and at the end of the referendum, it trends to 50% aye required, and that's for every referendum currently. Now, if both of these criteria are met, then a referendum will enter its confirmation period. And it gets met like this. So some amount of dot ends up voting on a referendum. It then meets the support requirement here. And then at that time, if the approval requirement is met, then it will enter confirmation period. So here at this time, let's say it's 85% approval required, so 85% aye. If that's met, then the ref's going to enter the confirmation period. But if the referendum is only at 75% aye, then we have to wait a bit more time because this approval curve has not been met, right? So we need to wait until it goes down to about here, and then at this time is when the referendum will enter its confirmation period. And then in most UIs, it's represented as confirming. So we can see here on this graph, this is a graph that we showed earlier, and this is for the treasurer track. So we can see that the support requirement starts, like I said, at 50% of all dot and trends down to 0%. But for example, here, it's still like some percentage, right? It's like 2% or something. So it takes a very long time for this support requirement to be met. And then the approval requirement for this referendum is very close to 50%, right? Because it's at near the end of the life cycle for the referendum, near the end of the decision period. Now, some people are getting confused about the decision period for some referendums, and we're going to take the Chainalysis referendum as the example. So here there is only 2 days left on its decision period, but there is 7 days left on its confirmation period, and you can see that on PokeAssembly as well. So there's 26 out of 28 days through its decision period, so there's 2 days left, and the confirmation period has just started. There's currently 0 days progressed out of 7. And a lot of people are asking the question, does this mean the referendum is doomed to fail because the decision period is going to end? And the answer is no. The decision period and the confirmation periods are two distinct things. The decision period does not pause when the referendum is in its confirmation period, and the confirmation period can exist after the decision period has ended. And this actually leads to the ability for voters to negatively snipe referendum. So for example, let's look at the Chainalysis referendum as the example. So here the support threshold, which is the voter turnout, has been met. And because it is almost at the end of its decision period, we can assume that the percentage of ayes required is around 50%. This means during the last 2 days of this referendum's decision period, if the percentage of ayes falls below 50%, then the referendum just goes back to its decision period. So you can see that here, we're in the last 2 days, for example. If the referendum falls below 50% aye, then we're in the safe zone because there's still time left on the decision period. And then there's time for people to vote aye to put it back above 50%. Now, if the decision period has ended, and that happens where we fall below 50% aye, we're in this instant rejection zone. So in the case of Chainalysis, there's 2 days left on its decision period, and then there'll be 5 days of confirmation period without a decision period that is ongoing. So if the number of ayes falls below 50% in these last 5 days, the referendum will be instantly rejected. And you can see that here. You've got your nice little safe zone somewhere here. And then at the end of the decision period, you've just got this instant rejection zone. So it means that the referendum is not failed to doom because of that issue with the decision period, but it does mean that if some voters, after the decision period has ended, decide they don't like this referendum, then if they drop it below 50% in this zone, the referendum will instantly be rejected. I hope that makes sense. If you have any other questions or anything, let me know in the comments.